It was a calm, ordinary evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun had just set, leaving behind a warm orange glow that slowly faded into the soft hues of twilight. Birds chirped their last songs of the day, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the cool evening breeze created a comforting background melody. In a modest but well-kept apartment at the end of a tree-lined street, Emily Carter was preparing to unwind after a long week. She was an intelligent young woman in her late 20s, living independently and managing a career in the technology industry. Her life was simple, yet fulfilling. She enjoyed her small routines, the little comforts of her home, and the quiet moments she could spend alone, away from the constant hustle of the world outside. Emily had always valued her evenings as a time to recharge. After work, she liked to settle into a slow rhythm, savoring simple pleasures. Tonight, she had decided to take a bath, one of her favorite ways to relax. She had drawn a warm bath in her bathroom, letting the water fill the tub with soothing warmth. The scent of lavender from a small candle flickering on the bathroom counter mingled with the faint aroma of her bubble bath. Soft music played from a speaker across the room, a gentle melody that made the stress of the day feel distant. For Emily, evenings like this were sacred, a chance to enjoy the quietness and peace that her busy days rarely allowed. As she sank into the warm water, Emily felt the tension of the week slowly melt away. She closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying the sensation of warmth against her skin and the comforting quiet of her home. Her mind wandered to small thoughts: an upcoming project at work, a text from a friend, the book she planned to finish this week. Everything was calm, predictable, and entirely ordinary. She felt safe in her little sanctuary, the world outside her apartment seeming far removed from the gentle peace of her evening ritual. But suddenly, the quiet was shattered. A loud, insistent knocking on her front door echoed through the apartment. At first, Emily thought it might be a neighbor, perhaps someone who needed help or wanted to borrow something. But the knocking did not stop. It was accompanied by raised voices, shouting commands that she could not clearly understand from the distance. Her heart skipped a beat. The calm evening had vanished in an instant, replaced by an unexplainable sense of urgency and confusion. Emily's mind raced. She wondered if she should call someone, but before she could react, the knocking grew louder, more forceful, and the voices more commanding. It sounded as if a group of people were outside her door, demanding immediate attention. Emily felt a rush of fear. She wrapped herself quickly in a towel, the sudden intrusion breaking every sense of normalcy she had felt just moments before. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the shock of the unexpected disturbance. She cautiously approached the door, peeking through the small peephole, her heart pounding. She could see the outlines of several uniformed figures, moving with a speed and determination that suggested they believed they were responding to a serious situation. Panic surged in her chest. Her mind struggled to make sense of it. Why would so many people be at her door? What had happened to make them come here so urgently? She felt a growing sense of vulnerability. Her safe, private space had suddenly been invaded by strangers, and she had no idea why. "Who is it?" Emily called through the door, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fear creeping into it. Her words were almost swallowed by the louder shouts from outside. The voices demanded that she open the door immediately, claiming they were acting in an official capacity and needed to enter. Emily froze for a moment, considering her options. She knew she had done nothing wrong. She was an ordinary citizen, living her life quietly and peacefully. Yet, these people seemed convinced that she was part of a situation far more serious than anything she could imagine. She felt a strange mix of fear and incredulity. How could a normal evening like this suddenly turn into something so intense? The knocking continued, now accompanied by the unmistakable sound of doors being rattled and handles being tried. Emily's mind raced with thoughts of safety. Should she call the police? But then she hesitated. These people were already claiming to be law enforcement. What if calling another officer escalated the situation? She needed to think quickly. Wrapping herself tightly in the towel, she stepped back slightly from the door and took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to protect herself, but she also realized that hiding or panicking might worsen the situation. She needed to remain calm, at least outwardly, while she tried to understand what was happening. Suddenly, the door was pushed open with force. Emily stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the sudden intrusion. Several officers poured into her apartment, their expressions serious, their movements urgent. Shouts filled the air, commands to move, to show identification, to stay where she was. Emily's mind struggled to catch up. She was frozen with fear and confusion, wrapped only in a towel, entirely unprepared for what was happening. The officers moved quickly, scanning the room, checking corners, and shouting at her to remain still. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do something, but the presence of multiple uniformed officers made that impossible. She was trapped in a situation that was escalating far beyond anything she had anticipated when she had simply been enjoying a quiet evening. Despite the chaos, Emily tried to communicate. She raised her hands slightly, indicating she meant no harm. "I'm not a threat," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Please, you're mistaken. I'm alone." The officers, caught up in what they believed to be a serious operation, did not immediately respond. Their focus was on securing the area, ensuring no danger was present. Emily's mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Who had called them? And why? She realized that this misunderstanding could have serious consequences, yet she had no control over the unfolding situation. Her calm demeanor was being tested in ways she had never imagined. As the officers continued their search, Emily's thoughts turned inward. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay focused. She noted their movements carefully, understanding that her safety depended on her ability to remain composed. She considered what she might say or do to clarify the situation without provoking further alarm. Every detail mattered: the tone of her voice, the words she chose, the way she positioned herself. She understood that in this chaotic moment, her ability to stay calm could prevent the situation from worsening. Emily's intelligence and composure became her anchor amidst the storm of confusion surrounding her. Finally, one officer paused, checking some paperwork and whispering to a colleague. Emily noticed a slight change in the room's atmosphere, though the tension was far from gone. She realized that this moment could be the turning point, where explanation might replace fear, and misunderstanding might be corrected. Yet, the uncertainty still loomed large. She remained alert, her senses heightened by the adrenaline coursing through her body. Every sound, every movement, every word mattered. The ordinary evening she had begun with such peace was now entirely consumed by an unexpected crisis, and she had no choice but to navigate it carefully. As the first part of the night's events unfolded, Emily felt a mixture of fear, confusion, and quiet determination. She knew that the outcome depended not just on luck, but on her ability to maintain composure and clarity in the face of the unknown. Her ordinary life had been interrupted, her sense of security challenged, but she faced the chaos with resilience. In the quiet moments between the officers' commands, she reminded herself that she was capable, resourceful, and intelligent. These qualities would guide her through the night, no matter how unpredictable the situation became. The evening, which had begun with peace, warmth, and the simple joy of a quiet bath, had transformed into something entirely unexpected. The intrusion of strangers into her home had shattered her sense of normalcy, replaced by fear, tension, and the unknown. Emily's journey through this moment was just beginning, a story of calm under pressure, of intelligence facing chaos, and of an ordinary woman confronted with extraordinary circumstances. Emily's heart continued to race as the officers moved through her apartment with swift, practiced efficiency. Every creak of the floor, every sudden movement made her flinch, but she reminded herself to stay calm. She had learned long ago that panicking in difficult situations only made things worse. Her mind worked quickly, trying to understand what could have caused this sudden intrusion. She wondered if it was a mistake, a miscommunication, or perhaps someone had reported a serious threat that did not exist. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she kept her focus on what she could control, her reactions, her words, and her composure. The officers were now speaking among themselves, their voices low but tense. They were clearly coordinating, deciding who would check which part of the apartment. Emily watched silently, trying to remember every detail: the number of people in the room, their positions, the tools they carried, and the subtle expressions that crossed their faces. Her eyes met one of the officers briefly, and she noticed a hint of hesitation in his movement. For a moment, it seemed as though the tension was shared, not just felt by her alone. But then the commanding officer barked an order, and the officer quickly regained his professional stance, moving as though nothing had happened. "Please, I don't understand," Emily said softly, trying again to make herself heard. I'm just Emily Carter. You must have the wrong person." Her voice was calm, though slightly trembling, and she hoped it conveyed sincerity rather than fear. One officer turned toward her, his expression unreadable, and motioned for her to stay where she was. They didn't respond with immediate acknowledgement, which only made Emily feel more vulnerable. She could see the determination in their eyes. They believed they were acting on an urgent matter, and her reassurances seemed insignificant to them. Emily wrapped the towel more tightly around herself and took a cautious step backward. She wanted to give them space while also staying alert. The officers began moving systematically through the apartment, checking closets, the kitchen, and even the bathroom doorway she had just exited. Their presence was invasive, almost suffocating, yet Emily did not argue. She realized that resisting or challenging them could escalate the situation further. Her mind raced with strategies. She had to think carefully about her next move, about what she could say or do to clarify the misunderstanding without causing alarm. One of the officers, a young man who looked no older than Emily herself, paused and whispered something to a colleague. They glanced at her with a slightly confused expression, as though something about her didn't match the description they had been given. Emily sensed a small shift in the room's energy. She took a deep breath and tried to speak again, this time choosing her words with care. "I promise, there is no danger here," she said gently. "You can check anything you need, but I assure you I am not who you think I am. I am alone, and I am safe." Her voice was firm, steady, and respectful, meant to calm rather than provoke. Despite her calm words, the officers continued their methodical search. Emily felt a mix of frustration and fear. How could they not see that she posed no threat? She considered that perhaps the problem was not with her, but with the information they had been given. Someone had made a mistake, and she was paying the price for it. Her mind flicked through possibilities: maybe a neighbor had called in a false alarm, maybe there had been a mix-up with addresses, or perhaps some official communication had been misunderstood. She felt a surge of determination to remain clear-headed, knowing that losing her composure could only make the situation worse. The commanding officer approached her slowly, his expression serious but slightly less aggressive than before. "Ma'am, we are following a report," he said. "We need to make sure everything is safe. Please cooperate." Emily nodded, keeping her hands visible and moving slowly. "Of course," she replied. "I understand you are just doing your job. Please check everything you need. I only want to help resolve this misunderstanding." Her tone was calm and cooperative, yet beneath it lay a quiet insistence on being treated with respect and caution. She knew that every word mattered, and that her demeanor could influence how the officers perceived her. As the search continued, Emily's mind began to consider the broader implications. She realized that this incident, strange and frightening as it was, could become more than just a personal ordeal. If the situation were mishandled, it could escalate into a serious legal or professional issue for the officers involved. She thought about the importance of documentation, of maintaining calm, and of demonstrating that she was fully cooperative. At the same time, she could not ignore her own feelings of vulnerability. Her home, Her sanctuary had been entered without her consent, and the violation of privacy was undeniable. Suddenly, one officer called out, asking for her identification. Emily quickly retrieved her driver's license from a small purse she kept nearby. She handed it over with steady hands, watching closely as the officer examined it. There was a pause, a moment when the room seemed to hold its breath. The officer's eyes widened slightly, and he whispered something to the commanding officer. Emily noticed a subtle change in the air, an undercurrent of tension, mixed now with surprise. She did not yet know what had caused it, but she sensed that the situation was about to take a dramatic turn. The commanding officer approached, taking the identification from the first officer. He examined it closely, his brow furrowing as he compared the name on the license to the report they had received. Emily felt her pulse quicken, uncertain whether this moment would worsen or resolve the situation. She remained still, her mind racing with possibilities. What if they refused to believe her? What if they escalated the situation further? She forced herself to focus on her breathing, keeping her outward calm while her mind prepared for any outcome. Finally, the commanding officer's expression shifted. There was a flicker of recognition, a realization that something about this situation was not as it had seemed. He looked at Emily with a new awareness, as if suddenly understanding the enormity of the error that had been made. The other officers, too, began to glance at one another, confusion and concern replacing the previous urgency. Emily could sense the tension easing slightly, though the atmosphere remained charged with unease. She had survived the initial panic, but the story was far from over. In that moment, Emily reflected on the absurdity and danger of the situation. Here she was, an ordinary woman enjoying a quiet bath, suddenly the center of a high-stakes confusion involving law enforcement. She felt a mixture of relief, disbelief, and lingering anxiety. How easily had her peaceful evening been disrupted? How vulnerable had she truly been? And yet, amidst the fear, she recognized her own resilience. She had remained calm, cooperative, and observant, qualities that had likely prevented the situation from becoming even more frightening. She reminded herself that her ability to think clearly and act cautiously was her strongest asset in this moment of chaos. As the officers began to adjust their approach, Emily sensed that the misunderstanding might soon be clarified. The room, once filled with loud commands and sudden movements, grew quieter. The officers spoke in hushed tones, consulting one another and reviewing their information. Emily remained attentive, knowing that the resolution depended on accuracy, communication, and calm. She stayed composed, her mind fully aware of the delicate balance between cooperation and self-protection. Every gesture, every word, every breath mattered. While Emily could not yet predict the outcome, she realized that she was not powerless. Her intelligence, her calm demeanor, and her careful observation had given her a measure of control over the situation. She understood that patience and careful communication were as vital as courage and resilience. The ordinary evening she had begun with peace, warmth, and solitude had transformed into a scenario that tested her character, her composure, and her ability to navigate a high-pressure situation. She was learning, in real time, that calmness under pressure could be as powerful as any external force. By the time the officers paused to confer once more, Emily had regained a measure of inner calm. She had survived the first wave of chaos, maintained her dignity, and avoided any direct conflict. She knew that the next moments would be critical, moments that could change the course of the evening entirely. Her mind remained alert, her senses attuned to every movement, every word, every subtle signal from the officers. She understood that the unfolding story was not just about the intrusion, but about her ability to respond with intelligence, composure, and courage. And so, Emily waited, poised between fear and hope, as the officers' next actions began to hint at a revelation that would transform the chaotic night into something far more astonishing than she could have imagined. Emily's eyes followed the commanding officer as he spoke quietly with the other officers. There was a subtle tension in the room, a feeling that something important was about to be revealed. The air, heavy with the echo of their earlier intrusion, now seemed filled with anticipation. Emily remained still, her body wrapped in a towel, her mind sharp and alert. She had survived the initial panic and maintained her composure, but she could sense that the next moments would determine whether this evening ended in humiliation, explanation, or complete astonishment. The officer returned to her side, his expression a mixture of caution and disbelief. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there seems to be a serious discrepancy here. Please remain calm while we verify a few details." Emily nodded, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "Of course," she replied. "I will cooperate fully. Please, just let me know what you need from me." Her words were measured, respectful, yet carried an unspoken firmness that reflected her growing confidence. The young officer who had initially spoken to her returned, carrying a tablet. He swiped through a few screens, tapping here and there, as if confirming a piece of crucial information. Emily watched silently, curious and cautious, trying to catch any clue about what the verification might reveal. The room was quiet, the tension now mixed with a sense of disbelief that seemed to ripple through the officers. Emily, though anxious, sensed that the situation was shifting in a way she had not anticipated. Suddenly, the commanding officer's eyes widened, and he leaned back slightly, a rare loss of composure visible for the first time. The other officers looked at him, mirroring his surprise. Emily's curiosity piqued. She tried to follow their gaze, trying to understand what had caused such a dramatic change. What is it?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The commanding officer took a deep breath, his hand moving slightly as if to steady himself. "Ma'am," he began carefully, choosing his words with great precision, "we were not aware, we did not realize, we have made a serious error." Emily tilted her head, puzzled, her pulse quickening. She had anticipated a misunderstanding, but she did not yet know the nature of this revelation. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what could have caused such a dramatic response. The officer glanced at the young man with the tablet, who nodded solemnly. "Your identity," the commanding officer continued, his voice still steady but carrying a weight of shock, "is Emily Carter. You are the daughter of FBI Director James Carter, is that correct?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. Her pulse quickened, and a mix of emotions surged through her: relief that the officers were finally recognizing the truth, frustration at the ordeal she had endured, and astonishment at the realization that her identity had finally been acknowledged. "Yes," she replied calmly, her voice firm despite the tremor of excitement she felt inside. "I am Emily Carter. I understand this has caused confusion, but I assure you, there is no danger here." The commanding officer took a step back, almost as if physically absorbing the weight of this revelation. The room, which had been tense with urgency and confusion, seemed to shift instantly into disbelief and cautious respect. The officers now regarded her with a mixture of surprise, respect, and perhaps even embarrassment. For a moment, silence filled the apartment, broken only by the faint hum of the ventilation system. Emily remained still, watching as the commanding officer made a few quick phone calls, speaking in low tones with someone whose authority exceeded even his own. She could not hear the conversation clearly, but the tone of his voice carried urgency and a trace of apology. She realized that the full implications of her identity were unfolding in real time. The officers had entered her home thinking they were responding to a critical incident, only to discover that they were confronting the daughter of one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. Emily's mind replayed the sequence of events: the sudden intrusion, the panic, the moments of confusion, and the officer's meticulous search. She understood that this had been an honest mistake, yet the gravity of the situation was not lost on her. It was a situation that could have escalated into chaos, but her calm, careful handling had likely prevented it from doing so. She felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had remained composed, observed carefully, and responded intelligently, qualities that had preserved her safety and dignity throughout the ordeal. The commanding officer returned to face her fully, his expression now a mixture of apology and respect. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice steady and formal, "we deeply apologize for this intrusion. It was never our intention to invade your privacy or cause you distress. We were acting on information that has now been clarified, and we understand the seriousness of our mistake." Emily nodded, accepting the apology gracefully. "Thank you," she replied. "I appreciate your professionalism in handling the aftermath. I understand mistakes can happen, but I hope we can ensure this does not occur again." As the officers began to pack up their equipment and prepare to leave, Emily observed their actions closely. She could see that they were still processing the situation, their movements slightly more cautious, their interactions marked by a newfound awareness of the significance of the person they had encountered. The young officer who had initially questioned her smiled faintly, a gesture that conveyed both relief and admiration. Emily offered a polite nod in return, acknowledging the human side of the officer's experience even amidst the tension and chaos of the evening. Once the last officer stepped outside, closing the door behind him, Emily allowed herself to exhale fully. The rush of adrenaline that had sustained her throughout the ordeal began to fade, leaving behind a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and lingering tension. She moved to the window, peering outside to see the police vehicles still stationed near her building. Though the immediate threat had passed, the memory of the intrusion lingered in her mind. She realized that the evening had not only tested her patience and composure but had also highlighted the unpredictable nature of life, where even ordinary moments could transform into extraordinary experiences. Emily reflected on the lessons she had learned. Calmness under pressure, careful observation, and measured communication had been her greatest allies. She recognized that her ability to remain composed, even in the face of fear and uncertainty, had prevented a potentially dangerous escalation. She also understood the importance of clear identification and verification in high-stakes situations. The officers had acted on incomplete information, and the consequences could have been severe if not for her thoughtful and careful responses. With a deep breath, Emily moved back to her living room, still wrapped in her towel. She sat down on the couch, allowing herself to process the evening fully. Her thoughts drifted to her father, the FBI director, and she wondered what his reaction would be upon hearing about the incident. She imagined his initial concern, followed by a measured approach to address the situation professionally. She knew that he would want to ensure accountability while also understanding that this had been an honest mistake, not a malicious act. Emily's phone buzzed on the table, a message from her father. She picked it up, her hands steady despite the lingering tension in her body. The message was brief but comforting. "Are you safe? Call me as soon as you can. Everything else we will handle." Emily felt a wave of relief. She typed a quick reply, "Yes, I'm safe. I'll call in a few minutes." The simple act of communicating with her father brought a sense of grounding, a reminder that she was not alone in navigating the aftermath of the evening's events. As she set the phone down, Emily thought about the officers who had stormed into her apartment just hours earlier. She understood that they had been acting on what they believed was critical information. While their actions had been invasive and frightening, she also recognized that fear and urgency can drive even well-trained professionals to make mistakes. Emily's reflections were not of anger but of understanding, a mature acknowledgement that human error is part of life, even in the most serious and high-stakes professions. The apartment, once filled with the noise and tension of law enforcement activity, now seemed unusually quiet. Emily moved through the space, checking the rooms, ensuring everything was in order. She found comfort in the familiarity of her surroundings, the knowledge that her home was once again her sanctuary. She took a moment to breathe deeply, to feel the calm settle around her, and to appreciate the resilience she had discovered within herself. As the night deepened, Emily began to prepare for a conversation with her father. She knew it would involve recounting every detail, explaining her calm responses, and perhaps offering guidance on how similar incidents could be avoided in the future. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, a pause to acknowledge that she had navigated a highly stressful situation with intelligence, composure, and courage. The events of the evening would not be forgotten, but they had also revealed her strength, her presence of mind, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. Emily leaned back on the couch, her thoughts turning toward tomorrow. She realized that life was unpredictable, that even routine moments could become extraordinary, and that her ability to respond with clarity and composure was invaluable. She felt a sense of empowerment, a quiet confidence that she could face challenges, large or small, with resilience and intelligence. The evening had tested her, but it had also reminded her of her own capabilities and the importance of patience, observation, and careful communication. The next morning, Emily awoke with a mixture of relief and lingering unease. The events of the previous night had left her mind buzzing with thoughts, questions, and reflections. Though the immediate danger had passed, the memory of the officers bursting into her apartment without warning lingered, like a shadow she could not shake off. She sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts drifting back to the moment when the commanding officer had recognized her identity and the instant shift in their behavior. It was remarkable how quickly respect and caution replaced panic and aggression once her status was understood. As Emily moved through her morning routine, she replayed the details of the night in her mind, analyzing each action and each reaction. She recognized how her calm, measured responses had kept the situation from escalating. Even when the officers had entered her bathroom, a place she considered private and sacred, she had managed to maintain composure. Her ability to speak calmly, provide information, and assert boundaries without hostility had shifted the balance of power. She felt a quiet sense of pride, knowing that her intelligence and patience had been her strongest allies. After breakfast, Emily decided it was time to contact her father. She knew he would want to hear the details firsthand, and she also understood that this was an opportunity to explain what had happened, ensuring that any misunderstandings could be addressed at the highest levels. She dialed his number, feeling a slight flutter of nerves, though she knew it was nothing compared to the previous night's fear. When he answered, Emily spoke clearly and calmly, recounting the sequence of events from the moment the officers had arrived to the revelation of her identity. Her father listened intently, his voice calm but firm as he asked precise questions. "Were you safe at all times?" he inquired, his concern clear. Emily assured him that she had been cautious and that her composure had prevented any dangerous escalation. "I stayed calm and observed everything," she explained. "I answered their questions, and I made sure they knew I was cooperative but also that I expected respect." Her father's voice softened slightly, a hint of pride audible beneath the professional tone. "Good," he said. "That was exactly the right approach. I'm glad you stayed calm." Their conversation continued, covering the officer's behavior, the commands given, and the steps taken after the revelation of her identity. Emily's father emphasized the importance of accountability and professional conduct. He explained that while the officers had made an honest mistake, it was crucial to ensure that such misunderstandings did not happen again. Emily agreed wholeheartedly, understanding that the incident highlighted weaknesses in communication and verification procedures that could be improved. She also recognized that her own actions had been critical in preventing the situation from escalating. After the call, Emily spent some time reflecting on the power dynamics at play during the previous night. She realized that authority, while important, could also be misused or misapplied if not coupled with careful observation and intelligence. The officers had acted under the assumption of urgency, guided by incomplete information. This assumption, while understandable in their line of work, had led them to intrude into her private space without fully confirming the details. Emily appreciated the delicate balance between urgency and caution, and she considered how her responses had influenced the outcome. Later in the morning, Emily received a visit from a senior FBI agent assigned to review the incident. The agent was polite and professional, taking careful notes as Emily recounted the events once again. She explained how she had maintained composure, communicated clearly, and cooperated fully while also asserting her boundaries. The agent nodded, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation and the professionalism Emily had demonstrated. "Your response was exemplary," the agent said. "You handled a very stressful and unexpected situation with intelligence and calm. We will review our procedures to prevent this from happening again." Emily felt reassured, knowing that the incident would be taken seriously and that corrective steps would be implemented. In the afternoon, Emily took a walk through the nearby park to clear her mind. The fresh air and gentle rustling of leaves provided a sense of calm she had not experienced since the intrusion. As she walked, she thought about the officers, imagining their perspective during the chaotic moments of the night. She considered the human element, their training, their instincts, their need to respond quickly to perceived threats. She recognized that mistakes, though frustrating, were often a natural consequence of human judgment, especially under pressure. While walking, Emily also reflected on her own reactions. She had realized the importance of preparation, awareness, and the ability to remain calm under stress. These qualities, she thought, were essential not only in extraordinary situations like last night but also in everyday life. She remembered the quick thinking that had allowed her to assess the situation, anticipate the officer's actions, and respond in ways that maintained safety and dignity. Each decision, no matter how small, had contributed to the peaceful resolution of a potentially dangerous encounter. Emily's thoughts then turned to her neighbors. She wondered what they had thought when they heard the commotion. She imagined the curiosity, concern, and perhaps even fear that might have swept through the building. Though she had been the center of the event, she realized that it had affected the surrounding community as well. This reflection deepened her sense of responsibility, reminding her that actions, whether taken by herself or others, could have wider implications beyond the immediate moment. As evening approached, Emily returned home, her mind still processing the day's events. She prepared a light dinner, her movements calm and deliberate. She reflected on the lessons she had learned, the importance of patience, observation, clear communication, and self-control. She understood that even in moments of unexpected chaos, maintaining composure could prevent unnecessary conflict and protect personal safety. She also recognized the value of empathy, understanding the pressures faced by the officers and the need to address mistakes with professionalism rather than anger. Later, Emily received a call from the commanding officer who had led the team the previous night. His voice was respectful, carrying a tone of genuine apology. He thanked her for her patience, cooperation, and professionalism. "Miss Carter," he said, "we recognize the seriousness of our error and appreciate the way you handled yourself. We will ensure this incident is properly reviewed and that corrective measures are implemented." Emily responded graciously, expressing her understanding while emphasizing the importance of preventing such incidents in the future. The conversation ended on a note of mutual respect, highlighting how accountability and communication could transform even a tense encounter into a constructive resolution. As she settled down for the night, Emily reflected on the resilience she had discovered within herself. The experience had been challenging, unexpected, and, at times, frightening, yet it had also revealed her strength, intelligence, and composure. She realized that confidence and calm could be cultivated through experience, reflection, and deliberate action. She felt empowered, knowing that she had navigated a high-pressure situation successfully, learned from it, and contributed to improvements in procedures that could protect others in the future. Before going to bed, Emily documented the events of the day in her personal journal. She detailed every moment, every decision, and every emotion, ensuring that she captured the experience fully. Writing allowed her to process the intensity of the situation, recognize her own agency, and reinforce the lessons she had learned. She knew that one day, she would look back on this entry as a reminder of her courage, intelligence, and ability to maintain composure under pressure. As the night deepened, Emily finally felt a sense of closure. The officers had left, apologies had been made, her father was aware and reassured, and corrective measures were underway. The apartment, once filled with tension and intrusion, was now quiet and safe once more. Emily allowed herself a deep breath, appreciating the peace that surrounded her. She realized that while unexpected challenges would continue to arise in life, her ability to respond thoughtfully, calmly, and intelligently would always serve her well. Before sleep took her, Emily reflected on the night's extraordinary events. She considered how quickly life could shift from ordinary to extraordinary, how perception could influence actions, and how composure and intelligence could prevent chaos from turning into disaster. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for her safety, for her father's guidance, and for the opportunity to navigate such a complex situation with dignity. Emily closed her eyes, letting the quiet of the apartment wash over her. She had faced fear, confusion, and intrusion with grace and intelligence. She had transformed a chaotic situation into an opportunity for reflection, learning, and personal growth. And as she drifted into sleep, she knew that the lessons she had learned would remain with her forever, shaping not only her responses to extraordinary events but also her approach to everyday life, relationships, and challenges. In the days that followed, Emily continued to reflect on the incident. She engaged in conversations with her father and other trusted advisors, discussing not only the specifics of what had happened but also broader themes of accountability, human error, and the importance of composure. She understood that the incident was more than a personal experience, it was a lesson in resilience, communication, and professionalism. Each conversation, each reflection, strengthened her understanding of herself and her ability to navigate complex situations. She recognized that her calmness, intelligence, and clear communication had been vital in turning a potentially dangerous encounter into an opportunity for learning and growth. Emily knew that the memory of the night would remain vivid, but it would also serve as a reminder of her inner strength, her ability to remain composed under pressure, and her capacity to influence outcomes positively, even in challenging circumstances. The morning sun streamed through Emily's window, casting a warm glow over her apartment. After the chaos of the past few days, the quiet light felt like a fresh beginning. She stretched, taking a deep breath, feeling the calmness in her chest. For the first time in days, she felt free from the tension and fear that had clouded her thoughts. Yet, there was also a sense of purpose inside her, a realization that what had happened was more than just an isolated incident. It had lessons, not only for herself but for the people around her. Emily decided to start the day by organizing her thoughts. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at her small wooden desk, opening her journal. The pages were already filled with entries from the past few days, thoughts, reflections, and descriptions of the events as they unfolded. Writing had become a tool for her, a way to process and understand everything clearly. Today, she decided, she would go deeper. She would reflect not only on what happened but on how she could grow stronger, wiser, and more prepared for anything life might throw at her in the future. As she wrote, Emily thought about courage. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to act thoughtfully in the presence of it. She had been scared, certainly, when officers had entered her apartment unexpectedly. The uncertainty, the rush of adrenaline, and the sense of intrusion had been overwhelming. But she had not allowed fear to dictate her actions. Instead, she had taken control of what she could: her words, her tone, her composure. Courage, she realized, was choosing to remain calm, clear, and decisive even when the situation felt out of control. After finishing her first journal entry of the day, Emily decided it was time to step outside. The streets were alive with the normal rhythm of the city: people walking to work, children laughing on their way to school, cars moving steadily along the avenues. The contrast between her recent experience and the ordinary flow of life struck her. Life moved on, even in the face of extraordinary events. Emily felt a strange sense of connection to the world around her. Everyone had their own challenges, their own fears, and their own ways of navigating life. And in her own way, she had faced hers with dignity and strength. While walking through the park, Emily's thoughts drifted to the officers. She had thought about them often over the past days, imagining the stress they had been under, the quick decisions they had been forced to make, and the pressure to protect and enforce the law. She realized that every person, regardless of their role, faced moments of uncertainty and responsibility. The difference was how one responded, whether with thoughtfulness and respect or with carelessness and haste. Emily felt compassion for the officers while still recognizing the importance of accountability. She understood that mistakes could happen, but they must always be addressed to prevent harm and ensure trust. Emily also thought about her neighbors and the broader community. She wondered what stories had been shared about the incident, how the noise, confusion, and commotion had been interpreted. She felt a renewed sense of responsibility not only for her own safety but for the safety and understanding of those around her. Her experience had reminded her that actions, even unintended, could ripple outward, affecting others in ways one might not immediately see. She decided that moving forward, she would be not only vigilant but also proactive, helping to foster understanding, communication, and safety in her environment. Returning home, Emily found her apartment calm and still. The echoes of the past few nights seemed to have faded, leaving space for reflection and planning. She prepared a light lunch, savoring the simple routine of cooking, chopping vegetables, and boiling water for tea. These ordinary tasks, which she might have overlooked in the past, now felt grounding. They reminded her of the importance of small, deliberate actions in maintaining stability and focus. She realized that strength was not only needed in moments of crisis but also in everyday life, in the discipline of maintaining order, mindfulness, and clarity. In the afternoon, Emily received a message from a trusted family friend who had heard about the incident. They offered support, encouragement, and advice, emphasizing the importance of rest, reflection, and self-care. Emily appreciated the kindness and perspective, recognizing that while she had handled the situation well, she also needed to nurture her emotional and mental well-being. She spent time reading, meditating, and simply sitting by the window, watching the sunlight shift as the day progressed. This time of calm reflection was essential, she realized, in balancing the intensity of her recent experiences with the need for peace and recovery. Later, Emily contacted her mentor, someone she trusted, for guidance and insight. She recounted the events once more, focusing not only on the facts but also on the lessons she had learned and the ways she had grown. Her mentor listened carefully, asking questions that encouraged deeper reflection. "What did you learn about yourself?" they asked. Emily thought for a moment. "I learned that I can remain calm under pressure, that my intelligence and preparation matter, and that my actions can influence outcomes even in challenging situations," she replied. Her mentor nodded, affirming her insights and offering wisdom on resilience, empathy, and proactive problem-solving. As evening fell, Emily felt a sense of closure beginning to settle in. She had processed the events, learned important lessons, and reflected on her strengths. But she also knew that closure did not mean forgetting. It meant understanding, integrating, and preparing. She had experienced fear, confusion, and uncertainty, but she had emerged with clarity, insight, and confidence. The incident had been challenging, yes, but it had also been transformative, teaching her the importance of calm, observation, and thoughtful action. Dinner that evening was quiet and comforting. Emily prepared her favorite meal, savoring each bite and appreciating the simple joy of nourishing herself. She thought about gratitude not only for her safety and well-being but also for the opportunity to learn and grow from an unexpected challenge. She realized that gratitude did not mean ignoring the difficulties she had faced, but acknowledging the value of the lessons they brought. The night's peace, she decided, was earned through awareness, reflection, and conscious effort. Later, Emily reviewed her plans for the next few days. She considered practical steps to maintain safety, improve communication with neighbors, and continue building her personal resilience. She also thought about ways to support others, sharing the lessons she had learned about calmness, observation, and thoughtful response. She understood that personal growth was not isolated, it extended into relationships, community, and everyday interactions. By modeling patience, clarity, and responsibility, she could influence the world around her positively. Before bed, Emily once again returned to her journal. She wrote a final entry for the series of reflections that had begun with the intrusion. She described the lessons learned, the strengths discovered, and the ways she had grown through the experience. Writing allowed her to organize her thoughts, affirm her growth, and commit to applying these insights in the future. She closed the journal with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that the act of reflection itself was a powerful tool in strengthening resilience and maintaining clarity. As she lay in bed, the apartment quiet and still, Emily reflected on the journey she had been through. She thought about fear and courage, mistake and accountability, chaos and calm. She realized that life was full of unexpected challenges, but it was her response that defined the outcome. By remaining composed, thoughtful, and aware, she had transformed a potentially harmful situation into an opportunity for growth, learning, and empowerment. Sleep came gently that night, carrying with it the sense of accomplishment and inner peace Emily had earned. She knew that the world outside continued its rhythm, full of surprises, challenges, and uncertainties. But she also knew that she was prepared to face whatever came next with intelligence, composure, and strength. The lessons of the past few days would stay with her, guiding her actions, shaping her decisions, and reminding her of the power of calmness, observation, and thoughtful response. In the days that followed, Emily continued her routine with renewed confidence. She walked through the city with awareness, not fear, she engaged with friends and neighbors with empathy and clarity, and she approached challenges with a thoughtful, measured mindset. The incident had been extraordinary, but its lessons had become ordinary tools for living, a reminder that even in moments of uncertainty, strength, intelligence, and composure could guide the way. Emily's experience, while personal, had broader implications. It highlighted the importance of preparation, observation, and clear communication in every aspect of life. It showed that mistakes, when met with accountability and reflection, could become lessons rather than tragedies. And it emphasized the value of courage, not the absence of fear, but the choice to act wisely and calmly in the presence of it. By the time the sun rose the following morning, Emily felt ready to embrace a new chapter of her life. The challenges she had faced were behind her, but the lessons remained. She had discovered her own strength, her capacity for reflection, and the power of thoughtful action. And as she stepped into the day, she carried with her a quiet confidence, a sense of clarity, and a determination to live with awareness, resilience, and integrity. The incident was no longer a source of fear or tension but a testament to Emily's ability to navigate life's uncertainties. It had been a defining moment, revealing not only the unpredictability of life but also the depth of human strength and intelligence. And as she moved forward, Emily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same calm, clarity, and courage that had carried her through the extraordinary days that had changed her life forever.